Good afternoon, everyone. It's 3:01, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I want to be mindful of everyone's time. Uh, my name is Debbie Griffin. I'm the Community Relations Economic Development Director for the city, and I work in Mayor Orman's office, and I serve as a liaison to her as well. So we wanted to just have a brief conversation today, or as long as we need to, with some of our restaurants owners and some folks in the community. If you have some questions during this, you can raise your hand button in your control bar, and we'll make sure and have our staff be available to answer your questions. But we also wanted to provide this opportunity to talk a little bit about the outdoor dining space. We've received a lot of phone calls and questions about that. So wanted to just have a conversation with the community, and hopefully we can answer some of those questions for you. I want to introduce the staff that's on the call today. We have Ellen Norville. She's in the back there. Ellen, can you wave? I think most everyone knows who you are, but Ellen is our Director of Planning. And then we have Danielle Simsrott, who's a Senior Planner with the city, and Tyler Overstreet, who is also a Senior Planner for the city. Mayor Orman will hopefully be joining us near the end of the call, but again, this is just a conversation to try to give you some information about what the current options are for expanding to outdoor dining, and some more information about an ordinance that our city council will be considering at the next meeting, which is on July the 14th at 6 p.m. And so I'm going to turn it over to Tyler. He's got a presentation, and then we'll follow that with a question and answer period for all of those on the call. And again, we appreciate you all taking time to be here today. And if you have questions even during the presentation, please just let us know, and we'll stop and try to answer those. Tyler?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Debbie. As she said, we understand there's been a little bit of confusion and discussion around what we currently allow in regard to outdoor dining. So we wanted to take some time today to discuss what we allow by our current code, and then also the ordinance that is going to City Council next Tuesday. I'll be presenting the material, and then I also have Danielle, Ellen here to chime in at any time as well. Please feel free as we go along. If you have questions, use that raise the hand function of Zoom, and then we'll you can interrupt us as we go, and then we'll have time for all questions at the end. So let's start by talking about our Sidewalk Cafe ordinance. This is the primary means we currently have to be able to do any kind of outdoor dining within public right-of-way. It's currently allowed within our C3, which is our central commercial, DN4, which is our downtown mixed-use district, DC, which is our downtown core, and DE, which is our downtown edge zoning districts. The requirements for sidewalk cafes are very, very general. You just have to allow for a minimum walkable clearance space of 5 feet between your outdoor furniture and the building, or the outdoor furniture and street trees. Just as long as there's 5 feet of walkable space, you're good. And then all those furnishings must be temporary in nature, so they need to be such that you can take them out and then put them away after close of business. Sidewalk cafes need to be open air, and then any projections over the sidewalk must maintain 7 feet of vertical separation. So let's say you have an umbrella on the table for your sidewalk cafe. There has to be 7 feet from the bottom of the umbrella to the sidewalk itself. The application process right now for sidewalk cafes is very, very simple. We just ask that you submit a written request to the planning department at planning@bentonvillear.com and include a diagram showing the location of the sidewalk cafe in relation to the building, sidewalk, and street. The one on the right-hand side of the screen is an application we received where they gave us an actual architectural site plan. You don't necessarily have to go to that level of detail, but we need to understand generally where it's going to be located, where the furniture is going to be, and how it sits in relation to the street and sidewalk. And then a letter of approval, it will be issued to the applicant from Ellen, our director.
And we can help provide those maps if you need assistance with our GIS site as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we have, we can provide you with an aerial photograph of your site, and then you can lay it out or draw it out from there. With that being said, that's kind of what we currently do in regard to outdoor dining downtown. So we'll kind of transition now into a discussion about the ordinance that's going next Tuesday. So we received a lot of questions and discussions. People understood, yes, I know I can do things out in front of my building and the sidewalk, but what about these public parking spaces a little bit closer to the street? Well, we've come up with a solution in the idea of parklets. So parklets are defined by NACDO as public seating platforms that convert curbside parking spaces into vibrant community spaces. So the idea behind a parklet is that it allows you to convert that public space in the public parking space into outdoor dining and seating space. So it allows you to utilize public space for private uses. It also allows downtown business owners to utilize that critical space adjacent to their property. I have a depiction of a parklet from the Urban Street Design Guide from NACDO here. You can see there's a guardrail incorporated into the design. There's a slight buffer from the travelway where cars travel. It is buffered on both sides from adjacent parking spaces. And these are all things that we'll discuss in a moment as we get into some of more of the design requirements.
Hey, Tyler.
Yeah.
Let's explain what NACDO is for people who may be on the line that don't understand what that is.
Yeah, so NACDO is the National Association of Certified Transportation Officials. It is essentially a professional organization that has their urban street design guide. They have an urban parking design guideline. They provide these guidelines to city, state, federal officials so that they can better design the urban form around some nationally accepted standards.
Yeah, for functionality and safety.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep. So why do we need them or why do we think it's a need? Well, COVID-19 has limited the ability of local restaurants to conduct their current business uses. And then, as I said earlier, we received a lot of feedback about the lack of adequate sidewalk space or designated parking areas for individual businesses downtown. And then they also provide us a unique opportunity to create a safe, pedestrian-oriented environment. So it allows for a much more walkable urban space adjacent to businesses. So getting into the actual ordinance itself. So we're going to allow for downtown businesses to enter into an encroachment agreement to utilize the public space adjacent to their business. Very similar to the Sidewalk Cafe process, a written request will be submitted to the planning department at planning@bentonvillear.com. We just ask that you include a diagram showing the area that you're going to be occupying, and then we will sign that encroachment agreement, which lines out provisions such as indemnification, maintenance of the parklet. There's an insurance requirement associated with it, and then minimum design standards, which is what I'll hop into in a minute. We don't ask you to necessarily lay out your entire site in regard to those design standards, but you will have to agree that you're going to meet them. And I'll go ahead and I'll transition into those design standards. So the first key one is size. So the maximum length of a parklet is equivalent to a business's street frontage, unless otherwise agreed to via a letter of support from adjacent businesses or property owners. So if you have one on-street parking space directly adjacent to your business, but say your neighbor sees it as a potential value for you to occupy their space via a letter of agreement or letter of support, you could then have a larger parklet. And then the maximum width is equivalent to the width of the public parking space replaced. So for downtown parking spaces, the typical width is 9 feet. So that would be your typical maximum width downtown. Location. So parklets cannot intrude into travel lanes, and they have to provide a 1-foot buffer from the travel lane and the parklet, which you can see depicted there there's a darker shading for the actual travel way, and then the lighter shading, which would be the buffer area for the parklet. And then a parklet should not be or may not be located within 20 feet of an intersection. This is to provide for proper sight distance. So at that intersection, we want for both pedestrians and for cars to be safe, and for the partakers of the parklet to be safe as well. So it's important that we provide that buffer from intersections. And then parklets should be buffered a minimum of 4 feet from adjacent public parking with wheel stops or bollards. So that just provides for that separation from the parklet to adjacent public parking spaces, which allows for people to actually be able to parallel park adjacent to the parklet without causing safety issues for either the car or the pedestrians utilizing the parklet. And then this one is a pretty important piece, and a piece that was pretty critical to the operation of these and for the safety of the city as a whole, is that they shall not block access to critical curbside infrastructure. So there shouldn't be a parklet in front of a fire lane, in front of a fire department connection, which you can see depicted on the right, in front of electric transformers, or in front of fire hydrants. So we need to still allow access to that critical utility and public safety infrastructure that is across the city. And again, so we'll go ahead and transition into some minimum safety standards. So again, they shouldn't interfere with pedestrian or traffic sight lines. And then they need to have some sort of continuous barrier no taller than 42 inches in height. And then seatings or plantings are encouraged. So here you can see a wood barrier that has some seating incorporated into it, but there's other options, guardrails that can be made out of steel, for instance. There's plenty of designs out there and plenty of inspiration. We're not going to dictate the specific look and feel of it, but we just want to make sure that you have some kind of visible separation between the private use of the parklet and the public way. Another critical safety standpoint is that parklets need to meet the requirements of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Some key provisions are the need for a 60-inch radius for wheelchairs, and then also being able to provide a 36-inch wide entrance at the sidewalk to the parklet itself. And then your parklet should be flush with the adjacent curb. You do that via building it to be completely at the same height as the curb, or you can also utilize steel transition plates, like what is pictured in the 2 pictures to the right. So here's some very, very general design requirements. Similar to the Sidewalk Cafes, parklets should be temporary in nature. They need to be removable. Wood frame, steel frame, or even pedestal systems like what's shown on the right-hand side are encouraged. Those are called Bison pedestal systems. They allow for the parklet to be elevated so that water can still drain underneath the parklet, and so that when this ordinance expires January 1, so that these could actually be removed. And then applicants should use high quality weather and slip resistant materials, both for safety and accessibility purposes. And then again, the parklet should not inhibit adequate drainage of water. By doing an elevated system like that, or I've even seen some systems where they'll do the elevated system and have, say, mesh screens to keep debris from getting trapped underneath the parklet, you can help solve for those issues. And here's just another look at that Bison pedestal system in service, where you can see it allows for a flush system with the parking stall on the right-hand side, where you have the wall all the way back of curb, where you may have it may be slanted to allow for water to drain to the curb line. This allows you to, even though the roadway is slanted, it allows you to have a flat surface for dining. That brings us to the end of the discussion about parklets and the new outdoor dining ordinance in particular. Any questions about this, please direct those to planning@bentonvillear.com. This was just a very, very general overview of the current process and the future ordinance that we're looking at adopting next Tuesday. I would just ask that for site-specific questions, Danielle and I would be happy to schedule time to go through the specifics of your site. And then we would also ask that Kayleen or Andrew, as you all get any questions, that you would just refer them to planning@bentonvillear.com as well. We're here to help and here to answer those specific questions for specific businesses.
So if we have any callers on the line, and we have about a little over 20 attendees on the line, if you have any specific questions that you would like to ask, if you could use your raise hand, I'll make sure and put you in the meeting so you can ask those questions. I don't see any questions yet. Okay, we have one from Katie Howe. Katie, go ahead, Katie, and ask your question.
Hey y'all, I stepped away from my desk just for a second, but I do have a question. How long are these parklets allowed to be in the parking spaces? You may have already answered that question.
So the ordinance for the parklet ordinance is set to expire January 1 of 2021. So for the next 6 months.
Great. And then as far as the materials used, is there an option to not have anything ground, so like to actually continue to use the parking space as it is? Does that make sense? Like to have chairs sitting on the asphalt?
It would need to meet ADA requirements.
Yeah, they do have to have a raised, isn't it, in the design standards, Ellen? Don't they have to have, it can't be right on the concrete, correct? Right on that.
If there's a curb, it would need to be raised to be flush with the curb. And that also helps with the drainage issues and things like that too. So it kind of serves two purposes as far as the ADA, but also to allow for adequate drainage.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank y'all.
Yep.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank
Again,
you.
remind everyone, this ordinance has not passed. It will be considered at the city council meeting that's coming up on July the 14th. But we just want to provide you some information on that. There's still several other callers. We have a question now from Brandon Davidson. Brandon, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, just so if this does pass, will you make this information available to the restaurants to have on hand to make sure we're following all the rules?
Absolutely, I know we will. And I've just received a text also from Kayleen is on the line at Visit Bentonville. We have the chamber on the line with us and Andrew with DBI. We will put it out through the city, but we'll also use our community partners to communicate that. And also want to note that Mayor Orman has joined the call if you have any specific questions that you have for her as well. She's online with us.
And I would just like to reiterate, Danielle and Tyler are going to be your contacts on this. So if you've had any concern about not being able to reach somebody, they will answer, look at your site specific and make sure we're giving you all the direction that you need to do this. And I'm sorry, I didn't catch the first part of this, but I'm guessing you went over what can already currently be done through the current planning process, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And then did we talk to them about this is the information that you would also take to ABC if that's, have we talked about that at all?
Not yet, but I think we were going to close with the note that you would also need ABC approval on any kind of outdoor beverage sales within the public right of way. Yeah.
Any additional question from those on the line? We have a question from Chris Suter from the Jones Center. Also, Chris is a city councilman. Chris, go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, first of all, great presentation. I think this is going to be really good for the downtown and for the community. But is there a limit on the number of parking spaces that can be occupied by a particular business? Does it have to be right in front of their business exactly? Or
So that was the width requirement, Chris, was
okay.
Needing to make sure that it's equivalent to their length of building frontage unless they can get support from their adjacent businesses and property owners.
And then is one last thing, is there a limit on how many can be on one block, or as long as they don't impede the fire and electric, you can have as many?
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And the line of sight, right, is important too. So
Yeah.
Right.
there's a distance between the intersection that I'm assuming you talked about all this. Sorry, I missed the first part.
Yeah.
No. We so those are the critical pieces. And kind of looking at it and walking downtown yesterday, Brian Barr, who's in our department, and I had the opportunity to look at some of the current conditions on most blocks, you'll have a handful in front of adjacent businesses, but those things like the access to utilities, the site distances, those things will inherently cause limitations to the number we can put on a block.
Yeah, understood. Thank you. Good job.
Okay, any additional question from those on the line? And if you have it later, you have the email address on your screen that you can send an email to or call the number, and Tyler and Danielle will be available to help you answer those questions. I think that's all for our presentation. Mayor Orman, do you want to give a closing remark?
I just thank everybody for joining us. And again, we wanted to give you some direct contacts in our planning department. So Danielle and Tyler, the number is on the screen for you. The email is on the screen for you. They are dedicated to getting back and answering your questions to you as quickly as possible. And if you'll reach out to us and let us kind of look at your site, I think we can give you good guidance and maybe some best direction on if you want to pursue this.